Wait, what? I blurted out, nearly choking on my drink. Vanessa's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. It was me, she said, her smile spreading as she basked in the sudden attention. My stepfather's face lit up with gratitude, and my mom's eyes filled with tears of pride. The room went silent save for the hum of the ceiling fan. I sat frozen, my hands clenched in my lap, every muscle in my body tensed. She couldn't have just said that, not after what I told her in confidence. My name is Jessica Neal. I'm 29 years old and work as a social worker. For as long as I can remember, I've been the kind of person who avoids drama and does what needs to be done without making a scene. A little over a year ago, my stepfather, Rob, was diagnosed with cancer. It devastated our family, especially my mom, who loves him more than anything. When the medical bills started piling up, I knew I had to do something. That's why I used my savings to pay off his debt, anonymously. The only person I had told about it was Vanessa, my older stepsister, someone I thought I could trust. It was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. Rob had just gotten a clean bill of health, and my mom wanted to mark the occasion with something special. She made her famous pot roast, the one Rob always says tastes better than his mom's used to. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic. The dining table was set with her good plates, and there was an extra chair squeezed in to accommodate Vanessa's husband, Derek. Everyone seemed happy, really happy, for the first time in what felt like years. I sat between my mom and Derek, trying to join in the light-hearted conversation, but my mind kept drifting. I felt a warmth in my chest every time Rob laughed, knowing he could finally relax without the weight of those hospital bills. He'd even made a toast to the Good Samaritan who paid off the debt, thanking them for their generosity. I had smiled quietly into my glass, content to keep my secret. That was when Rob, out of nowhere, asked, "Was it one of you?" His eyes scanned the table, hopeful but not pressing. My heart sped up, but before I could decide how to react, Vanessa leaned back in her chair, grinning like a Cheshire cat, and said, "It was me." I stared at her, my throat tightening as the room erupted into applause. My mom's face lit up with pride, and she reached across the table to squeeze Vanessa's hand. "I knew it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've always had such a big heart." Rob looked at her like she was some kind of hero, his voice soft as he said, "Thank you, sweetheart. I don't even know what to say." But it was Derek's reaction that really caught me off guard. He blinked, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth, and then said, "Wait. You did this? When?" Vanessa didn't even flinch. She turned to him with that same syrupy smile and said, "Of course I did. I didn't tell you because I wanted it to be a surprise." Derek stared at her for a moment, clearly trying to process what she'd just said, but then shrugged and went along with it, muttering something about how proud he was. Meanwhile, I sat there in stunned silence, my hands gripping the napkin in my lap so tightly I thought it might tear. She had lied not just to the family, but to her own husband. And the worst part? She didn't even hesitate. Dinner carried on as if nothing had happened. Rob shared stories from his treatment days, making us laugh with his descriptions of the grumpy nurses who eventually warmed up to him. My mom kept chiming in about how strong he had been through it all, and Derek cracked jokes about how Rob must have charmed the doctors to get extra Jell-O cups. The mood was light, warm, exactly what you'd expect at a dinner celebrating a second chance at life. But Vanessa wouldn't look at me. Not once. Every time I glanced her way, she avoided my eyes, focusing intently on her plate or making a point of talking to anyone else at the table. It was like she knew I was daring her to meet my gaze, to acknowledge what she'd done. Her fake smiles and easy laughs didn't fool me for a second. Beneath all her charm, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tight grip on her wine glass. She knew I wasn't going to forget this, even if I stayed silent for Rob's sake. When dinner finally ended, I could barely get out of there fast enough. I hugged my mom and Rob, told them how proud I was of him for staying strong through everything, and slipped on my coat. Vanessa gave me a quick, perfunctory smile as I walked past her, but I didn't bother trying to say goodbye. My mom called after me to drive safe, but I could barely hear her over the rush of thoughts in my head as I stepped into the cold night air. The drive home felt like it lasted forever. I replayed the night over and over, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It should have been a celebration, a moment of relief after everything Rob and my mom had been through. Instead, it had turned into this bizarre charade. I kept asking myself how Vanessa could sit there and lie to everyone like that, how she could look Rob in the eyes and take credit for something she had no part in. And the worst part? I let her steal the moment because I didn't want to ruin the night for Rob. But now, sitting alone in my apartment, the silence felt unbearable, and I couldn't stop wondering if I'd made the right choice. As I sat on my couch, staring blankly at the TV that I hadn't even bothered to turn on, I knew deep down what I had to do, or rather, what I couldn't do. Telling Rob the truth might have cleared my conscience, but what good would it do for him? He'd been through so much already, and he was just starting to feel like himself again. The last thing he needed was to be dragged into some ugly fight between Vanessa and me. He didn't deserve that, not after fighting so hard to beat cancer. And I convinced myself that staying quiet was the right thing to do. Rob's peace of mind mattered more than my anger or frustration. As much as I wanted him to know the truth, that I was the one who had his back when he needed it most, it wouldn't change anything for him now. If anything, it might make him feel guilty for celebrating Vanessa when he should have been thanking me. And honestly, he didn't need guilt. He needed to heal, to be happy, to focus on living. So, I decided to let it go, for him, if not for me. The next morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I called Vanessa while sitting at my kitchen table, my coffee untouched and growing cold. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her tone bright and casual, like nothing had happened. "Hey, Jess," she said, as if we were best friends. "What's up?" I didn't waste time. "We need to talk about last night," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. There was a pause, just long enough to feel heavy. "What about it?" she finally asked, though I could hear the tension creeping into her tone. "You know what?" I shot back. "Why did you lie to everyone and say you paid off Rob's bills? We know that wasn't you. I told you in confidence. How could you do that to me?" Vanessa sighed heavily on the other end of the line. "Jess, look, it's not a big deal. I didn't think you'd be this upset." "Not a big deal?" I snapped, gripping my phone tighter. "You stood there and lied to everyone, Vanessa. You took credit for something you didn't do, something I sacrificed a lot for. How is that not a big deal?" She hesitated, and for a second, her voice softened. "I just wanted to make Dad proud of me. He's always been proud of you, Jess. You're the selfless one, the one who helps everyone. I didn't think you'd mind if, just this once, I could have that moment with him." I was stunned. "Are you kidding me? This wasn't just some harmless lie, Vanessa. You know what I went through to make that happen. I emptied my savings account so Mom wouldn't have to stress about the bills, so Rob could focus on getting better. And you thought I wouldn't mind?" "I thought it'd be fine," she snapped back, her voice sharper now. "I didn't think you'd actually care who got the credit. I mean, you didn't even want to tell him, right? You were happy to let it be anonymous. So what does it matter if he thinks it was me?" "It's not about the credit, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I didn't do this to be thanked or celebrated. I didn't even want Rob to know it was me. But lying? That's a completely different matter. You knew it wasn't you, and you let everyone believe it was. You let Mom and Rob look at you like you were some kind of savior. How can you live with that?" Vanessa let out an exasperated sigh. "Jess, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's not like I hurt anyone. Rob's happy, Mom's happy. What difference does it make? You're the one who said you didn't want recognition, so why does it matter who they think did it?" "It matters because it's a lie," I snapped. "You've turned something that should have been about helping Rob into a way to stroke your ego. And now I'm stuck sitting here, watching everyone praise you for something you didn't do. Do you know how humiliating that is for me? Not because I want the attention, but because it's a betrayal, Vanessa. You betrayed me." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, Vanessa said quietly, almost defensively. I didn't mean to hurt you, Jess. I wanted to feel like I was enough, for once. Like I mattered. I'm not going to tell your dad, I said, my voice cold and measured. Not because of you, but because of him. He's been through enough, and I won't add this to his plate. But Vanessa... I paused, taking a shaky breath. I want you out of my life. I can't keep pretending that what you did doesn't matter. Jess, come on, she said, her voice rising with panic. You can't be serious. You're really going to throw our relationship away over this? I told you I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to hurt me, I repeated, disbelief dripping from every word. You lied to my face, you lied to your own husband, and you stole something that wasn't yours to take. You knew how much that sacrifice meant to me. And for what? To make yourself feel better? No, Vanessa. I can't trust you anymore. She started to say something, but I cut her off. One day your conscience is going to catch up with you. Maybe not today, maybe not even next year, but it will. And when it does, I hope you think about this moment, about the sister you pushed away just to make yourself look good. My voice cracked, but I held firm. I hope it was worth it. Vanessa didn't reply. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating, until I finally hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, my hands trembling, the weight of everything sinking in. I felt raw and hollow, but at least I'd finally said what I needed to say. A year passed, but things between Vanessa and me never went back to normal. We still saw each other at family gatherings, birthdays, holidays, the occasional barbecue, but we might as well have been strangers. Conversations were polite but hollow, and we avoided being alone in the same room. The tension between us wasn't just noticeable, it was impossible to ignore. Mom was the first to bring it up. After a family dinner one night, she pulled me aside, her brow furrowed with worry. Jessica, she said softly, what's going on between you and Vanessa? You two used to be so close. I shrugged, trying to play it off. We're fine, Mom. Just busy with life, I guess. But I could see she wasn't convinced. Rob had noticed it too. At Christmas, he asked why Vanessa and I didn't sit together anymore. You two used to laugh so much, he'd said. I forced a smile and changed the subject, but it stung more than I expected. A few months after that Christmas dinner, Vanessa started reaching out. It was subtle at first, texts here and there. Hey, how's work going? Or, Mom said you've been really busy, hope you're okay. I ignored every single one. I couldn't bring myself to engage with her. Each message felt like a tiny jab, a reminder of what she'd done and how easily she had betrayed me. At family gatherings, she tried harder. She'd make small talk or ask me questions about my job, but I kept my answers short and polite, giving her no room to dig deeper. At one dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my drink. Jess, I know things haven't been great between us, but maybe we could grab coffee sometime? Just talk? I didn't even look at her. I'm busy, I said flatly, brushing past her. She sighed, but I didn't stop to see her reaction. Whatever she was trying to do, it wasn't enough to erase the past year. A few weeks after that awkward dinner, Mom mentioned something that caught me off guard. Vanessa's been going to church, she said, her tone almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure how I'd react. She's been feeling, I don't know, empty, I guess? She told me she's been thinking a lot about life and wanting to make some changes. I raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Vanessa, going to church? It didn't add up. She'd never been the religious type. Always too busy, too modern for anything like that. Mom must have noticed my skepticism because she added, I think it's good for her. She seems calmer lately, more reflective. Maybe this is exactly what she needs. I nodded absent-mindedly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was another one of Vanessa's attempts to patch things up. If it was, I wasn't buying it. People don't just change overnight, and I wasn't ready to let my guard down. One evening, as I was settling onto the couch with a book, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen and saw Vanessa's name. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, like I had so many times before. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity or a nagging sense that this wasn't just another one of her surface-level attempts to reach out. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Jess," she said softly, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to tell you something." I stayed silent, gripping the phone tighter. She took a deep breath and continued. "I've been struggling with what I did, what I said that night." Her voice cracked, and I could hear the emotion in her words. "It's been eating at me, Jess. I thought I could just move on, pretend like it didn't matter, but it does. It matters a lot. I couldn't help myself." The words came out before I had a chance to soften them. "Should I tell you I told you so?" My voice was sharp, edged with all the frustration I'd been holding on to for the past year. On the other end of the line, Vanessa let out a shaky sigh, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. "You have every right to say that," she finally replied, her tone raw. "You warned me, Jess, and you were right. I thought I could live with it, but I can't. Every time Dad looks at me with that pride in his eyes, it feels like a dagger. I know I don't deserve it. And you? I know I don't deserve your forgiveness either." Vanessa's voice wavered as she continued. "I've thought about coming clean so many times, Jess, but I'm terrified. What's Dad going to think of me? What's Mom going to say when she realizes I lied to her face? And Derek, he didn't even know what I did that night. How do I explain that to him?" I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. For all the pain she'd caused me, I could hear genuine fear and guilt in her voice. "You're afraid of their reaction," I said, keeping my tone steady. "But what did you think was going to happen when you took credit for something you didn't do? Did you honestly think it wouldn't catch up with you eventually?" I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. "Vanessa, I'm not going to force you to do anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is your mess, and you're the one who has to deal with it. I already made my decision a long time ago to stay quiet for your dad's sake. But your guilt, your conscience, that's on you. No one can fix that but you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know if I can, Jess. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face it." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "You're going to have to figure that out for yourself." I hung up. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. "Vanessa, I'm not going to force you to do anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is your mess, and you're the one who has to deal with it. I already made my decision a long time ago, to stay quiet for your dad's sake. But your guilt, your conscience, that's on you. No one can fix that but you." Before she could respond, I added, "You're going to have to figure that out for yourself." Then, without waiting for her reply, I hung up the phone. I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart pounding, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, anger, and, oddly enough, pity. I wasn't sure if Vanessa would ever own up to what she'd done, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't carrying her guilt anymore. A few weeks later, I got a group text from Vanessa. It was an invitation to a family dinner at her house, something she hadn't done in ages. "I'd love to have everyone over," the message read, with an overly cheery tone that felt forced. "Just a casual evening, good food, good company." I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. It felt out of the blue, especially after our last conversation. Mom quickly replied, "Sounds wonderful, we'll be there." Rob chimed in with a thumbs-up emoji, and even Derek added, "Looking forward to it." I reluctantly typed back, "I'll come." The evening came faster than I expected. I pulled into Vanessa's driveway, already bracing myself for whatever she was planning. Her house was immaculate, the lights warm and inviting. Through the window, I could see the dining table set with care, complete with candles and what looked like her best china. As I stepped inside, Vanessa greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jess," she said softly, "thanks for coming." I nodded but didn't say much, still unsure of what she was up to. Once everyone had arrived and settled in, Vanessa cleared her throat and stood near the fireplace. "Can I have everyone's attention for a minute?" she said, her voice shaking just slightly. The cheerful chatter died down as we all turned to look at her. She clasped her hands together, glancing at Derek for support before looking at the rest of us. "There's something I need to say. Something I've needed to say for a long time." Vanessa took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she clasped them in front of her. "I've made some terrible mistakes in the past," she began, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "One mistake in particular. It hurt someone I care about deeply, and it's been weighing on me ever since." She paused and glanced at Derek, who gave her a small, encouraging nod from his seat beside her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and she seemed to draw strength from it. "I've been struggling with how to handle it, and I've been talking to my priest. He's been helping me realize that the only way to move forward is to face it." Rob leaned forward in his chair, his expression tense. "Vanessa," he said, his voice filled with concern. "What is it? What mistake are you talking about?" His hands gripped the armrest tightly, his anxiety visible, while Mom's hand rested lightly on his arm, her own confusion etched across her face. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint tick of the wall clock as we all waited for her to continue. Vanessa took another deep breath, her voice shaking now as she began. "Last year, when Dad was recovering from his treatment, there was something I did that I've regretted every single day since." She looked down at her hands, her composure starting to crack. "At the dinner we had to celebrate his recovery. When he mentioned that someone had paid off his medical debt, I lied. I told everyone it was me." She glanced around the room, her eyes filled with tears as she continued. "But it wasn't me. It was Jessica." The weight of her words hung in the air, and I felt every pair of eyes shift to me. Jessica was the one who used her savings to pay off the debt. She was the one who made sure Dad and Mom didn't have to worry about the bills. And I took credit for it. I took her sacrifice and made it my own, because I wanted Dad to be proud of me. I wanted to feel like I was enough, just for once. Her voice broke as she dropped to her knees, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry. Jess, I betrayed you. I lied to everyone, and I hurt you in a way I can never take back. Dad, Mom, I don't even know what to say. I've been carrying this guilt for so long and I couldn't hide from it anymore. Please, please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I had to tell you the truth." The room was silent except for her quiet sobs. Derek reached out to steady her, his hand resting on her shoulder, but she stayed on her knees, her face crumpled with regret. Rob looked at her, his face pale and stunned, while Mom's hand shot up to cover her mouth. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. Through her sobs, Vanessa continued, her voice raw and broken. "Jessica, she's an angel. She's the most selfless person I've ever known. She didn't tell Dad what I did, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want him to worry. She cared more about his peace of mind than about what I took from her. She's so good, so selfless, that she didn't even want him to know she was the one who paid the bills in the first place." Her shoulders shook as she wiped her face with trembling hands. "I've spent this past year hating myself for what I did to you, Jess. I don't know how you stayed so quiet, how you kept all of that inside while I took what was yours. You're so much better than me. I could never be like you, but I wish I could. I wish I had your strength, your kindness. I've spent my whole life trying to feel like I'm enough. And I realize now that it wasn't you I was competing with. It was myself." Vanessa buried her face in her hands, the room heavy with the sound of her sobs. Derek knelt beside her, gently wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Rob and Mom sat frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and deep emotion. I didn't know what to say, my heart twisting in ways I hadn't expected. It's been 6 months since that night. 6 months since Vanessa got down on her knees and told the truth in front of everyone. Things haven't gone back to the way they were, and honestly, I don't think they ever will. But they've changed in ways I didn't expect. Vanessa has been different, quieter, more reflective. She still reaches out, though I can tell it's hard for her. She sends texts sometimes, small things like, "Saw this and thought of you," or, "Mom said you weren't feeling well. Hope you're okay." Rob and Mom handled the truth better than I thought they would. Rob was disappointed in Vanessa, I could see that, but his love for her didn't waver. And with me, he's been even warmer, always finding little ways to show his gratitude, like saving me the best piece of pie at dinner or asking about my work in a way that feels genuine. It's strange, but I think in some ways that night brought us closer as a family. Not perfect, but closer. As for Vanessa, she's still trying to be the best version of herself, and for the first time, I think she means it.